the Minister of State for Petroleum has met with the President at last, you may say. The minister's meeting is coming after a leaked memo which some say has revealed a level of dirt or the politics in the state oil firm. NNPC, NLC, SERAP, the National Assembly have all shown interest by calling for a probe on the matter. So the meeting between the President and the Minister of State for Petroleum lasted for about 1 hour and 20 minutes. But how did the meeting go? What are the details of the meeting? Reporters asked the minister, and here is his response. Watch.
Honorable Minister, thank you. You just had a meeting with Mr. President. What did you discuss?
No comments.
He may not have any comment, but we will comment today because that's a matter of national importance when it comes to allegations of corruption in perhaps the richest or the wealthiest agency of government. And it appears that the aggrieved minister is not the only one who was at the presidential villa where the man he accused of insubordination, the NNPC GMD Mekanti Baru, got his chance probably for fair hearing. Look at him there today at the villa working into the premises of the seat of power. Shortly after Kachiko left the presidential villa, Baru was also cited leaving the vice president's wing of the presidential villa. He had met the chief of staff to the president, Abba Kyari, before heading to the office of the vice president. Well, tonight on the program, let's get perspectives on all of this issue. I have a policy analyst and lawyers here with me in the studio. First and foremost, a man with parliamentary experience and also a lawyer, Honorable West Idahos, joins us on the program, and also a regular analyst on the program, Mr. Daniel Buala, a member of Lincoln's Inn of London. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming on the program tonight.
Thank you very much.
As far as the time that you were at the National Assembly, there's always been talks about the rot and the corruption in the NNPC. When you heard about this issue, Honorable Idahosa, what came to your mind?
Well, I'll be honest with you, I wasn't too surprised. The reason is because, as you do know, when the country depends largely on oil, to whom much is given, much is expected, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. There's too much concentration of power in that agency, and so a lot had happened. But the point that I quickly noticed was that that institution is established by law, regulated by law, and one allegation that struck my mind was the fact that huge sums of money worth of contracts were being awarded without the input of the board. If you look at section 1(2) of that act setting up the NNPC, it's very clear, and I quote, the activities of the corporation shall be carried out by the board. By the board. So if you operate outside that, ipso facto, you are already dwelling in illegality. And
but if it's by the board,
yeah.
can the GMD act on behalf of the board?
The point is, the board has its own composition. You have, of course, the minister designated as chairman. You have institutions like the Ministry of Finance and the rest of them. Then you have the GMD, who is just one member of the
He's an executive, a chief executive
of
that board.
No, of the corporation, but he's not the chairman of the board.
Yeah, but he's an executive of the board.
He's in the sense that the board.
He's an active, he acts in the executive capacity on behalf of the board, isn't it?
No. He acts in
There are administrative members of the board.
Yeah,
there are executive members of the board.
In my own opinion, he is the chief operating officer of the corporation. His membership there is to brief the board, keep the board abreast of plans and programs, financial requirements, and allow the board to make decisions.
When the president made announcements of ministers, he did say he will handle the petroleum ministry. Yeah. Who knows whether the president actually signed off on some of these appointments and some of these projects?
No, he won't be able, because by the powers conferred on him in the act, he's entitled to nominate a board chairman. And he had publicly nominated the Minister of State as the board chairman, and that gentleman had become functional in that capacity.
But if the president, if we find out that the president is actually in the know of all these appointments and all of these allegations of projects that have been awarded without the Minister of State's knowing, if we understand that eventually that the president is actually aware, would the GMD be found wanting in that also?
It will be still irregular as far as I'm concerned. If you follow the letters of that law, you will find out that there is a functional board chairman. You can't sidetrack. If you have the power to remove him, you may remove him. But as long as he functions as the board chairman, you cannot undermine him, you cannot sidetrack him, and you cannot operate behind him.
Okay, let's take a look at, because we will still come to the political part of these issues. Still talking about the operation of this institution. This is an institution that perhaps has, there are talks and reports that the corruption that goes on in Nigeria, 50% of it goes on in the NNPC. Right. That's the nation's cash cow. Right. When you heard this, what came to your mind? Because this government, assuming power, actually said it was going to probe the activities in the NNPC, going to restructure the NNPC. Did you say yet again?
Well, thank you for having me. I try to look at it in a broader spectrum. Shegun, there is elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about. It is a crisis of confidence associated with the administration of the president. Whether you talk of the GMD, or you're talking of the Minister of State, or you're talking of the substantive minister. Well, by way of corporate governance, we know that the governing board of any organization, usually they give approvals, but the chief executive officer carries out, functions. But you see, there is another memo that got leaked again about a massive allegation against the group managing, against the Minister of State. So when you look at the content of both either the memo or his own letter to the president about someone who disrespects him, you will come to the conclusion that there is a power play. My opinion is that both of them have to go. But the fundamental issue is beyond them. I look at the bulk of the responsibility lying on the desk of the president. And I'll tell you something. Under Section 5, subsection 1, A and B, and Section 148, the president is the alpha and omega of the administration of the government. And so he is liable by any act of any of the officers under him. The question is, where do we start? Is it with the Ibe Kachuku and the group managing director? Is it with the NIA and the chief of staff? Is it even with the chief of staff of the what is it called? The Aso Villa? Now look at it, Shegun.
Aso Villa Clinic.
Aso Villa.
The Villa.
Yes, the chief of staff, Abba Kyari. Yes. He is the chief of staff. He is a member of the board of NNPC. There is a conflict of interest in the first place. He is the one you have to see before you see the president. So when Ibe Kachuku complained about not having access to the president, rightly or wrongly, the chief of staff cannot be extricated. If you look at other climes like America, what has happened over time under the administration of the president? In other climes, these people would have gone. Ryan Prevost was chief of staff of the White House. He had to go for an issue that is not even as grievous as the way allegations are coming against the chief of staff of the president.
Politically speaking, should the chief of staff to the president be a member of the NNPC board?
He should not. There is no basis, you see.
But is there any law stopping him also?
There is no specific law, but you see, government runs on transparency. There is what is called appearance of conflict of interest. Even the conflict of interest and appearance is not expected to be so. And he became a member of the board after he became the chief of staff. It would have been a different case if he was a member of the board before he was appointed as the chief of staff. And I hold the view that after appointment, he ought to relinquish his position as a board member.
As someone who not only follow Nigerian politics, I study politicians and political leaders in Africa and other parts of the world. I know President Muhammadu Buhari as a master of delegation of duties.
Right.
I mean, from the time that he was a military head of state, to the time that he was a former minister of petroleum resources, and up to this moment, anybody that has worked with him will tell you that he knows just how to delegate responsibility. Mr. Honorable Wesley Dawosa, I mean, you've been a politician. Is it politically wrong to ask chief of staff, because delegation of duties, political appointments, it's about trust, isn't it?
Yeah, but you see, the chief of staff is by definition, in my own opinion, not qualified to have been in the board. And if you look at it, the board has provided for statutory occupants. And then the liberty to appoint any person was probably limited to about 2 or 3. And if the president was going to do so, there are time-tested technocrats in the oil and gas industry. And of course, certainly not the chief of staff. And do not also forget that the chief of staff puts the president in a position where people will begin to read ulterior motives and begin to wonder whether the chief of staff represented special interest.
And politically speaking also, I mean, seeing a president, chief of staff is responsible.
Of course.
So is he also, you're not surprised that the minister of state is frustrated that he's not been able to see the president?
It was clear that that frustration may have come from that axis.
And again, are you surprised now that also when some people said there is government in government?
No.
Could that be true?
Well, they don't want to accept the word cabal. Well, okay, let's just remove the government. So your new definition of government in government is very manifest. Now, everyone knows that a situation where a serving minister of state complains about being able to gain assets.
Right.
What else can you say about that?
All right.